Hi guys, Olive here today to talk about the books I read in September 2020. Before I get started, let me just say that I've been having a little bit of a struggle with fiction lately. It was the majority of what I picked up this month, which I planned purposefully in advance to kind of offset the exclusively nonfiction reading month I always do during Nonfiction November. I try to make it so there's a little bit of balance for the year as a whole. But it's not like the fiction books I'm picking up are bad necessarily, or at least most of them, but there's just something about them that's not clicking with me. I'm choosing ones that aren't right for me, which happens. There were a few books in the month of September that I really didn't get along with. I am, however, going to wait to talk about those books until the very end of the video, because I personally find it more pleasant to talk about the books that I at least saw positives in, even if they only ended up earning 3 stars. That's still a whole lot better than DNFing them, which I did with 2 books this month and should have done with 3. So let's get to talking about the books. The first book I would like to talk about is We Ride Upon Sticks by Quan Barry. This was the first successful completion for my unofficial Straggler September initiative, which was basically just me having a desire to read books off of previous month's TBRs that I didn't get a chance to get to. This was one of the main ones that I had in mind when I voiced that initiative during my September TBR, because I was so excited about this one earlier in the year, and I was sent this review copy, so I really wanted to get to it. I did start this book when I was originally sent it earlier in the year, but I feel like I put it down for 2 main reasons. The first one being that the prose in this book is very dense. There is a lot going on with all of the jokes and the 80s references. It kind of read like a Gilmore Girls script where it's funny and entertaining, but there are so many words. But also, I don't know why this book came out in March. This is a book that is clearly best read, if not in October, then sometime during the fall/autumn season. I myself felt the craving to pick this book back up. When temperatures started dropping here in Pittsburgh in like mid-September, it started feeling like fall, and so I felt the desire to pick this book back up, which is precisely why I have that opinion about the release date. This book is about a women's high school field hockey team in the late 1980s who all sign their names in this Emilio Estevez notebook, doing black magic, basically, to help their truly awful team start winning games. That's basically all there is to the plot of this book. The narrator is this omniscient voice of the team as a whole. I guess that's justified by the fact that they're all connected by having their names written down in this book, but we do also go team member by team member and get to know a little bit more about them as individuals and what all they have going on at the time. The writing is really intelligent, very funny. I would say the whole thing is highbrow, quick-witted, and pop culture reference heavy, which does make it a little bit dense, as I said before. But it does feel like an 80s teen movie. The narrator struck me as Winona Ryder in Heathers. For all of those reasons, I really liked this book, and I particularly enjoyed all of the descriptions of this one team member's really wild, really big 1980s hairstyle. They call it the claw, and this author comes up with a million different ways to describe what this hairstyle looks like or what kind of a mood it's in. It pretty much has a life of its own. Each description is more hilarious than the last, and it is almost worth reading this book exclusively for that. There were plenty of other moments too that actually made me laugh out loud, so I was pleased with all of that. But I don't think the plot really went anywhere. There wasn't really much to it, and I thought the end section where the team was all grown up was largely unnecessary. I don't think it made for an effective ending. I felt cheated out of a good ending. So if you're looking for a completely different kind of spooky read for the month of October, this one might be for you. But I do just want to warn you, you should probably go in looking for an 80s teen movie kind of experience rather than for an actual scary story. I also read A Deception at Thorncrest by Ashley Weaver. This is the latest installment in the Amory Ames Cozy Mystery series that I love so much. This one has married couple Milo and Amory settled down in their country home, seemingly ready to take it easy. But when not one, but 2 scandals break out in the normally quiet neighboring village, Amory feels compelled, of course, to stick her nose into the matters, plural. This was a very different kind of mystery for this series. First of all, Milo and Amory aren't traveling. They're at home on their own turf, which is so different for them. They are normally traveling all over the place. So right away it felt more domestic. But then also the nature of the mysteries that AJickery is investigating, those were very different as well. I obviously can't say exactly what I mean by that or else it would spoil it, but I did get the sense that the author wanted to do something a little bit different. She wanted to take things a little bit slower. I don't think this one was the best in the series by far, but I love these characters and I love the way Ashley Weaver writes stories, so I was going to enjoy this one no matter what. So if you're like me and you're very invested in this series, I think you might enjoy it as well. I also read Jazz Moon by Joe Okonkwo off of my bookshelves. The story of this one is split between Harlem and Paris in the 1920s. Our main character is Ben. He is a black man, a poet, living in Harlem when we first meet him, and he is married to a good female friend of his. He cannot, however, commit to this marriage as much as he would like to and as much as his wife would like him to, because he's gay. He keeps trying to fight this thing, as he calls it, this attraction to men, until it eventually becomes something that can no longer be denied, and he starts up a relationship with a very talented jazz musician. This whole book is essentially about the relationships that Ben gets into, why some of them work, while others don't. I will admit I went into this book looking to get some good atmosphere, maybe even some good descriptions of jazz music, and I'm pleased to report there was at least some of that in here. There were some scenes in jazz clubs, which were really cool. And there were also some descriptions of the music that Ben's jazz musician boyfriend was playing. He was really talented. So it was really evocative, the way that was written. I really enjoyed that. That was a positive. Another positive is the poetry that Ben writes. I'm assuming Joe Okonkwo must at least dabble in poetry because it was absolutely beautiful. By far the best thing about this book. But the fact that this book is so much about those relationships that Ben is in, most of which are toxic, at least in my eyes, was the main negative. I wouldn't say that this book was bad by any means. It's just not all that memorable. So 3 stars. A positive of the month overall was the fact that I read 2 romance books. I've been trying to read at least 1 romance book every single month. I'm trying to get into romance this year. And this month I read 2 romance books. The first one was The Bromance Book Club by Lyssa Kay Adams. The premise of this book is absolutely adorable. It is all about a group of men who are either actively going through or have previously gone through a rocky period in their relationship. This group of men create this secret book club in which they read romance books to try to learn how to turn things around in their own relationships. The main characters of this first book in the series are Thea and Gavin. Gavin is a professional baseball player, and he married his wife Thea very early on in their relationship when they found out they were pregnant. Since things were so whirlwind in the beginning of their relationship, they are a few years into their marriage, and they're so busy raising twins and dealing with Gavin being on the road for long stretches of time that they realize they don't know each other as well as they probably should. We learn that just before the events of the book start, Gavin and Thea have had a massive blowout of a fight that really rattled them both. And we learn that Thea asked Gavin to leave the house and that he agreed. It's at this point that we enter the story and we get to see Gavin be inducted into this romance book club since he's going through a hard time in his relationship. We also get to read snippets from the book the club is reading, which is directly related to what Gavin is going through. I thought that was a really cute addition. I was really liking this book at the beginning, but as I kept reading, I found it more and more frustrating how much Thea was bringing her sister into her marital issues. Of course, I know you need someone to talk to about your problems, but it's generally not a good idea to talk about issues in your marriage with a member of your family because that member of your family has their own relationship with your partner and they can't unhear anything you tell them, so it can kind of poison that relationship. If these two have professional baseball player money, might I suggest a therapist? Gavin did screw some things up, both before the events of the book and during the events of the book. He does some screw up things, I will admit that. But both Thea and her sister, if she wants to bring her sister into the mix, so will I. they have some underlying issues that absolutely influence their behavior throughout this book, but then everything is blamed on Gavin, and I don't think that's fair. So that aspect was very frustrating, and then the grand gesture that the book ends with was super cringy. I don't like the concept of grand gestures to begin with, but I'm certainly not going to find something romantic if it is incredibly rude and disrespectful to all of the other people around these characters. So this was yet another 3-star read for me. I am, however, very interested in keeping on going with the series. My second romance pick for the month of September was also part of a series. It was the second book in the Well Met series by Jen DeLuca, and it was called Well Played. Just like the first book in the series, the story of this one is set in small town Maryland, and it revolves around a Renaissance festival. The lead character is someone who we met in the first book, but in this book, she gets her own romance. That love story starts off as an online relationship that turns out to be much different than our main character was expecting when it becomes IRL. I made a video here on my channel during the month of September in which I reviewed the first book and this second book in the series. If you're looking for a great romance series to get into, I will link that review for you up in the cards and in the description box below. Then I read another book off of my shelves, which was another unofficial goal of mine for the month of September. That book was Bohemian Gospel by Dana Chamblee Carpenter. This is magical historical fiction that takes place in 13th century Bohemia. This is about a 15-year-old girl named Mouse who has long possessed powers that she doesn't understand and that she cannot entirely control. She was raised in a convent and trained as a healer, so even if her powers aren't entirely of this world, they are certainly significant enough to help save the injured king. But even when the king recovers, his life is still in danger, so Mouse accompanies him back to the capital. Unfortunately, though, some dark spirits seem to be attracted to her and follow her to the city and terrorize the entire population. Throughout this book, Mouse is simultaneously trying to figure out her own parentage, where she comes from, why she is the way she is. She's trying to find a way to contain the darkness that follows her around, and she's also trying to figure out how to address her growing feelings for the king. I liked a lot about this book. It's very fast-paced, it definitely kept my attention, and it's unlike really any other magical historical fiction book that I've ever read, but it was almost like there was too much going on. Mouse had far too much power, and it was weird because sometimes she could control it, and other times she couldn't, and it wasn't even like she was learning how to control it as time went on. It was just entirely random and very conveniently placed, of course. So it wasn't very consistent in that way, and I thought the ending was very strange. It was just a very strange choice. So this was yet another 3-star read for the month of September. Just so many of those. And after giving it some thought, I don't think I'm going to continue on with this series. This is the first book in a trilogy, and I just don't think I want to read the remaining 2. My one 5-star read of the month is a work of nonfiction. No surprises there. That book is Loving Sports When They Don't Love You Back by Jessica Luther and Kavitha Davidson. This is a book essentially about the conundrum that sports fans face. How do you justify keeping on tuning in when there are so many visible, well-known issues within the sports that we love? The book covers a wide range of topics, things like controversial mascots, crimes committed by players, doping scandals, the deleterious effects that big sporting events like the Olympics can have on a community both during and after the event. And that's just a sampling of some of the things. There are so many things discussed within this book. Both of these authors are sports writers, and they have been for a very long time, so it kind of goes without saying that they are also sports fans who have come up against these kinds of questions. I won't tell you that they necessarily solve the problem within this book. They don't definitively answer the question of how you go on supporting sports when you know about some of these problems, but they do portray everything fairly, and their tone is very hopeful. They are optimistic that things could be made better, especially if we are all aware of them and work to make them better so that we all can feel better about supporting the sports that we love. I was lucky enough to get to interview Jessica and Kavitha for a Q&A for the Christian Science Monitor. That Q&A is live on the Monitor's website, so I will put a link to it in the description box below if you'd like to check it out. Both of them are super nice, and I loved their books, so it was a really great experience. I also read Solution Solutions and Other Problems by Ali Brosh, the long-awaited sequel to Hyperbole and a Half. As a big Ali Brosh fan, I was largely satisfied with this new book, but I did notice a couple of things that kept it from being as magnificent as Hyperbole and a Half. If you'd like to hear more of my feelings on this one, I did a full review of it, and I will link that for you in the description box below and up in the cards. Okay, so the book that I've been putting off talking about up to this point in the video is one that I know a lot of people love, so I am not excited about voicing my dissatisfaction, but I have to be honest that I gave 1 star to The Storied Life of AJickery by Gabrielle Zevin. I was prepared to adore this book, and more than that, I thought for sure that it was going to end up on my year-end fiction favorites list. I feel like I should have learned by now that anytime I'm that certain about something, the universe is ready to laugh in my face. This book is about a curmudgeonly bookseller who eschews nearly everything except literary fiction. He is a book snob, he lives on a tourist island in Massachusetts, and he lost his wife just shy of 2 years before this book opens. A 2-year-old girl is left in his bookshop one night, and despite having zero knowledge about child rearing, he decides that he's going to keep her. And the rest of the book is essentially about their life together, about the life of this bookseller and all the loves and tragedies that make up his life. Where do I even start with this one? Okay. Everything in this book is made far too simplistic. The actual adoption process that exists in the real world is about 1,000,000 times more complicated than what is shown in this book. And more than that, we don't get to see AJ do basically any actual parenting in this book. Everything is fast forwarded to the quotable moments in their lives, so we don't get to see the characters do any living, any growing. As someone who has experience working in childcare, I was really disappointed that I didn't get to see any nitty-gritty everyday parenting going on. I didn't get to see the character of AJ learning how to become a parent. Taking care of children is as much about the everyday routines, the everyday successes and failures, as it is about the big moments like graduation. The book is extremely gimmicky. The reason why we only see those big, heartwarming moments is because the author is trying to emotionally manipulate the audience. I've said it before, but I'll say it again. I am just not someone who leads with emotions. I don't have a choice in the matter. It's just how I'm wired. Emphasis on wired, because I feel like a robot most of the time. So when I see that an author is slamming down on a button trying to get the emotional response that they want out of their audience, I'm really put off by it because they're using a cheap trick instead of doing the work of an author, which is about creating a genuine connection between the reader and the characters over a period of time. And when I see an author doing that, I'm mad on behalf of people who do lead with emotions, because people aren't marionette puppets. You shouldn't pull on strings that you know are there for any reason at all, and definitely not to sell a product. There are so many weird things going on in this book that I'm having a lot of trouble seeing how people overlooked. Like, just for instance, there are so many swear words in this book, and it is often gratuitous. Now, I am not someone who's offended by swear words. Again, I married a man from New Jersey. I am very comfortable with them being used around me. But to insert so many of them into a book like this that's meant to be a touching book, they seem like they come out of nowhere. I was going to give this book 2 stars because I liked some of the bookstore stuff, like any book lover would. But then there was a passage right toward the end when something that was supposed to be making me feel sad was going on that literally made my jaw drop open. I can't say it here because spoilers, obviously, and also it is highly inappropriate, but I included the direct quote in my Goodreads review if you want to go check it out. But wow, this is one of the worst books I've read all year. I also DNF'd 2 different books during the month of September. I'm only going to briefly talk about them here because I didn't finish them, clearly. So I put down Remarkable Creatures by Tracy Chevalier a little over halfway through the book. This was another one I thought I was going to love, again with the universe laughing in my face. I was buddy reading this one with Sophie from Redhead Reading, and we both had a lot of trouble connecting with this book. I just felt like it was a literal fleshing out of Mary Anning's story. It was like you took the Wikipedia article and jazzed it up a little bit with dialogue. There was so little personality to it that it was just really boring. It wasn't offensive, it was just kind of dull. I really didn't want to start skim reading it, so Sophie and I decided it would be best to just put it down. And then right at the end of the month, I picked up Sashenka by Simon Montefiore and DNF'd it shortly thereafter. There's not a ton of reasoning as to why, it's just I wasn't enjoying it, and after the month I had, I couldn't take committing to another book I wasn't going to end up enjoying. So no thank you to this one. I'm getting rid of it. So there you have it. Those were the books I read during the month of September. Obviously, I'm disappointed that I didn't love more of these, but I think we all have these kinds of months sometimes where the books just aren't clicking with us. I have every confidence that October is going to be much better. I would love to hear from you if you've read any of these books, if you've heard of any of these books, or if you would now like to read them after hearing about them in this video. You can put that or any other more general comments or questions down in the comment section below. But if you would prefer to connect with me somewhere other than YouTube, I am on a variety of different places on social media, and the links to all of my profiles will be in the description box below. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you're having a wonderful day, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.